AI's impact on operations and people, Salesforce's partnership with AWS, and digital transformation success versus failure. Those are just a few of the topics we'll cover here in episode number 167 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This podcast features technology agnostic and international discussions related to digital strategy, software selection, implementation, change management, business process optimization, and everything else you need to know to make your digital transformation project successful. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 167. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Chwialkowski. Darian, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here today. Got an exciting show for you today. First of all, this is the weekly podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation, and it's a tech agnostic view of the world. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, and we're an independent tech agnostic consulting firm that helps clients with digital transformations throughout the world. And the show is sponsored by Major Tom Productions. You can find past and upcoming episodes of the show at transformationgroundcontrol.com, so be sure to check it out there. We've got a great show for you today. We're going to open up with some audience questions on social media that we've received lately. We'll also get into some newsworthy topics here today. We're going to talk about artificial intelligence in banking based on a LinkedIn article that we discovered here recently. And then we're also going to get into Salesforce's partnership, their expanding partnership with AWS, and what that means to the Salesforce and CRM, ERP ecosystem. And then later in the show, we'll have our guest on the show, Lauren Ryder, who is the CEO of a company called Leading Edge. She is going to be on the show talking about AI's impact on business operations and people. So we'll not get into the technicalities of AI, but more importantly, talk about how it's affecting organizations in reality throughout the world here today. And then we're also going to get into, later in the show, we'll have Hans Moulder on the show, an interview that I have with him that I actually hosted in Amsterdam when I was there a few weeks ago. I had a chance to sit down with him and do a fairly brief interview with him to talk about digital transformation success versus failure. So we're going to talk about that later today. And that's going to be based on a lot of his research and experience as an expert witness, as well as being a professor as well. So be sure to stick around for that. He's a very interesting guest, has a lot to say and a lot of knowledge. So before we jump into our interviews and guests here today, Darian, what are some of the audience questions that you've pulled for us from social media?
Yeah, so these first couple audience questions are actually from a very recent YouTube video on Eric's channel. This is from the YouTube video, The Death of Cloud Software. One of the comments was, my experience is that cloud surpasses on-premise costs in about 3 years. If you're looking at having a 5 to 7 year break even for cloud versus on-premise, then cloud may be cheaper as you are going to have HW/SW refreshes every 5 to 7 years, including repurchasing of software in many cases. And then he puts this in parentheses, the annual support cost is much higher than the licenses anyway. What is your take on this, Eric?
Yeah, that's an interesting take, an interesting point. So he's suggesting, or that person is suggesting, that it's actually more expensive for on-prem when you factor in hardware refreshes and potential software refreshes. And I know that is a real cost of on-prem. There's also the labor costs associated with maintaining on-premise systems that can add up over time, especially if you're using a really old proprietary technology. Like old mainframes used to have or they still do have a programming language called RPG that not many people know anymore because it's an obsolete technology or an obsolete code. But to find someone who knows RPG that is still working and still living in many cases, you're going to pay more for it because there's so few of them. And so those are real costs you have to factor in. The thing with hardware, though, hardware costs have come down so much over the years that I don't see that as a super material cost. I mean, keep in mind, you're not trying to build a massive data center like AWS would have. You're trying to build an infrastructure internally that'll support your applications and your transaction volume, which for most organizations, that's not a huge cost, especially when you compare it to the ongoing costs of cloud services or SaaS-based software solutions. So every business case is going to look different for different organizations. Of course, it depends on what your legacy environment looks like and what your on-premise system looks like compared to whatever cloud solution you're going to, and that's going to be a different comparison for every organization. But I've seen that in general, I would say in general, my experience has been maybe not the opposite, but different from what this person is saying. I've found it to be that after 5 or 7 years, cloud actually ends up becoming more expensive in most cases. In some cases, yes, on-premise is going to be more expensive because you've got those maintenance costs, the hardware costs. If you have to re-implement software because it's obsolete, of course, that's a big cost as well. So you have to look at your individual situation, and I think the key takeaway here is do a business case. It's not until you do a realistic business case that you know whether or not you've got one cheaper option over the other.
Definitely. And this is actually the second social question is actually from the same video. And it's kind of a different take as well. And he says, good points, all of them. But in 10 years from now, there will be no on-premise installations. With the amount of AI technologies, there's no need for companies in the world to be able to, or no way companies in the world will be able to afford on-premise or compared to cloud solution.
Yeah, I tend to be a bit skeptical of absolutes, one extreme to the other. I mean, I think it's fair to say on-prem will likely be pretty rare, but I think there's always going to be cases where there is something that an organization wants to keep on-prem. Whether you agree with it or think they should or not is a different story, but it's more about the realities of politics and human behavior, and in some cases security issues, and in the case of government regulations and things of that nature. There's certain things that prevent certain parts of organizations from going to the cloud, and those things may persist in the future. So, for example, if you can't host your data in the cloud because it's highly sensitive, it doesn't matter how efficient cloud is or how cost effective it may or may not be. It really doesn't matter. If there's a regulation or something that prohibits you from moving to the cloud, it doesn't matter. So, and we can argue all day whether or not you should go to the cloud. Well, it doesn't matter if there's a regulation that states otherwise. So I think that that's really the thing. And I also think there will be somewhat of a backlash at some point, and I talk about this in the video that these questions came from, which it seemed like created a lot of controversy and comments on it. But my point in the video was to highlight some of the risks and the trade-offs with cloud, because I think the industry likes to market cloud as this silver bullet magical answer that solves the world's problems, but the reality is there's other problems that get created. Doesn't mean you should move to the cloud, but it does mean that you've got to consider those things. Interesting points there. But in the video, I talk about some of the considerations like cost and long-term cost benefit and things of that nature.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. And our last social question today comes from a different YouTube video. It's on the YouTube video, Digital Transformation Blame Game, which is also on Eric's channel, if you guys want to check that out. This comment is, good points. I think implementation partners get the projects often with a stringent timelines, and the team then delivers, but there's gaps that can just be created then if it's delivered on time. He thinks that clients should think about having their own dedicated team full-time on the project that will increase the success rate. Do you agree with this?
Yes, I completely agree with that comment. And I think it's a real challenge, a real problem where a technology implementer, especially if they're operating in a fixed bid or a not to exceed contract scenario where they can't exceed a certain number and they have to finish the project within a certain amount of time and money, they're going to understandably push to rush through that as fast as they can because they've been incentivized to. And even if they're not in a not to exceed or fixed bid contract scenario, most software vendors want to get the software implemented as quickly as possible, partly because the vendors start making money as soon as you start using the software more. So there's an economic incentive there. And then, of course, the service providers, the technology partners that do the technical implementations, they make more if you implement faster because they can staff all those people and bill all those hours sooner than if you take longer to do the project. So there's always going to be these incentives for technology implementers and partners to implement fast and cheap, but your job, and by having full-time people from your own team internally, is going to be to ensure that you're not just deploying technology, but you're deploying technology that gets used by the business and works for the business. And that's where you need that sort of equal partnership between your internal resources and your your technical implementer. And too often organizations are too light on the internal resources and they rely too heavily on the technical implementers. And the technical implementers don't know your business. They honestly don't care about your business long term. They care about deploying technology, but your people do care. So you've got to make sure you've got that balance there.
Yeah, and I think that one thing I can kind of take from this comment is that if you don't have that team internally, then you can kind of lose power in your project. Is that true?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. You lose power, you lose ownership, you lose control in many cases. But by having a more robust team, and it's not even number of resources necessarily. It's the commitment of the resources you have and the knowledge of the resources that you have on the project. The more knowledgeable they are, and the more commitment you have from the resources on the project, the more likely it is that you're going to have ownership and control of the project and be able to make the decisions that are going to affect you in the business longer term.
Yeah, some great social questions today from our audience. I always enjoy seeing what they have to say.
Yes, great questions, and I appreciate everyone that asks questions and comments. I actually read all of them on YouTube and LinkedIn especially. So anyone that ever comments on my posts, I read all those. I don't always have time to reply to them all, but we try to pick off some of them to discuss here in the podcast. So thank you for that, and keep the questions coming for sure. We're going to shift gears here and get to a couple newsworthy topics here. After a quick break, we're going to get into artificial intelligence and banking, as well as talk a bit about Salesforce's partnership with AWS and what that means to the CRM community. And then after that, we'll have our first guest on the show will be Lauren Ryder, the CEO of Leading Edge Global, a consultancy out of Australia. She's going to be joining us from Sydney to talk about AI's impact on operations and people. So stick around for that. And then later in the show after Lauren, we'll have Professor Hans Moulder from the Netherlands will be joining today. An interview I actually conducted while I was in the Netherlands a few weeks ago. And we're going to play you that clip of about a 20 or 30-minute interview I had with him to talk about digital transformation success versus failure based on his experience and his research as a professor, as an academic, and also as a consultant and expert witness. So we're going to chat with him about some of his lessons and takeaways there. So be sure to stick around. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. People oftentimes ask me how I built such a strong social media following on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and other outlets. And the fact of the matter is it took me a long time to build a following through a lot of trial and error, making a lot of mistakes. Had I known that there were companies out there that could help me build my brand, I would have done that a long time ago. I didn't know that, but the good news is that there is today a consulting firm that will help you through building your own personal brand through some of their training programs. The company is called Roloff Consulting, and if you're familiar with Emma Roloff, she's someone that I've had on this podcast before, and she's well known in the digital transformation space as well as the sales space, and she's big on TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And she and her husband have started a training course and a training company that focuses on helping people build their personal brands and helping them to sell themselves digitally. So whether you're a salesperson that's trying to reach more customers or you're an individual that's just trying to build your personal brand, that's something that they help with through their training programs. And they've offered listeners of this podcast a free 5-day LinkedIn challenge. And I encourage you to check it out. I've included a link below for this podcast. If you go to the podcast notes, you'll find a link that gets you free access to this 5-day challenge where you'll get step-by-step guidance. You'll get real results. So you'll get some tangible results from the program. And you also get a special offer at the end of it. So it's exclusive to listeners of this podcast. Be sure to check out the link below if you want to work on building your personal brand, or if you're in sales and you're trying to reach more people. Whatever the case may be, check it out. It's free to listeners of this podcast. You can check it out via the link below.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology, independent, and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
I'm gonna leave it all out there, and I'm gonna leave it all out there.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 167. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of the show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. And the show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, an independent tech consulting firm that helps clients with digital transformations throughout the world. And you've got a couple of interesting newsworthy items for us here today. Darian, what do you have in store?
Yeah, so the first newsworthy item that we have today is about AI in banking and how that's developing. So this article was written by Manuel Barragan, and this outlined how AI has been revolutionizing the banking industry. In 2023, we saw generative AI adoption, productivity increase, and automation risk in management processes. Other emerging benefits from AI in banking include reductions in operational costs, improved customer experience with chatbots, and automation in investment processes. While AI can provide benefits, it's also essential to address the challenges such as security, transparency, managing workforce transitions, and finding the right balance between automation and human expertise into maximizing its potential in the banking industry. Where do you feel, Eric, the line is when it comes to automation and human expertise, specifically in the banking industry?
Well, I think the banking industry, from what little I know about it, is ripe for more automation and more AI and less human intervention. There's just a lot of, when you think about all the data, the volumes of data that a bank or a financial institution has on its individual customers and all the transactions that go along with that. And of course, all the institutional investments and things that happen on the internally within banks. There's just a lot that can be done with data and automation. Having said that, though, it's also highly regulated. It's risky, in terms of there's a lot at stake when you're dealing with a financial services organization, because it's more prone to cyber security issues and potential data breaches and things of that nature. So you do need a certain amount of data or human intervention, not only for potential breaches and cybersecurity issues, but also just making sure that someone is adding their knowledge to what the AI models are telling them or what they're learning from AI. So as we'll talk about it, and we're going to discuss this with Lauren here in the next segment when she joins us here for the interview with her, you really need both. You need the technology and you still need the people. I don't think jobs are going to disappear as quickly as some may fear. I think it's just going to change jobs and change the focus, and the way we engage with AI will continue to evolve too.
Yeah, and I think this is a really interesting topic because I think when you get into banking, obviously there's a lot of sensitive information there that people definitely don't want anybody else to get, whether it's their bank accounts or social security or anything else that your bank would have on you, I guess, for information. So I think that plays an interesting role into the dynamic of, well, do I want it all to be ran by humans, or do I want some of that? Maybe people feel a little bit more protective if it is automated a little bit by AI. I'm curious to see what our audience prefers on this topic specifically, whether they prefer a mix of both, all of one, all of the other. I feel like it'd be a very interesting topic for our audience to comment on.
Yeah, and a good segue or input into our guest when she comes on here in a few minutes. I'd be curious to see what the audience thinks on that, and we'll dive into it with our guest as well.
Yeah, so my second question from this article that I have for you, Eric, is from the lens of a change management expert, what advice or warnings would you offer banks prior to implementing these new technologies and AI developments into their processes?
I would say, you want to make sure that you're very deliberate about how you're using AI and also how you're not. One of the things we didn't mention, this sort of goes along with cybersecurity, definitely goes along with privacy and potential confidentiality issues, is that, we have to remember that a lot of these AI tools are using open AI models where they're designed to learn from inputs you give it. So if you were to have an AI model that's capturing, sensitive transactional information about your customers or whatever the case may be, because you want to use AI to summarize or to predict what might happen as a result of history or whatever the case may be, we just have to remember there's sort of an unknown there with what happens to that confidential information. Is it part of an AI model now, an open AI model? And the answer is yes. The question, though, becomes how at risk is that? Are you breaching any sort of confidentiality issues or intellectual property issues? And these are things, by the way, that are not just concerns with banks, but they're also concerns with any organization that deals with sensitive or confidential information. You just have to recognize that AI tools will potentially pull that information, or it'll expose that information to be more in a public domain. So now I don't remember what your question was. Am I even answering your question? Am I totally off track here?
No, you are. I think another question that kind of spawned from that comment was, do you think that banks or other industries that have this sensitive information, hospitals or anything like that, will they have to maybe disclose what they're using AI for in that to like people that are going and using their services?
That's a great point. I would think so. I would think that knowing how governments throughout the world work, including, here in the U.S. where we're based, in Europe where we have a presence, and in Australia where we have a presence. You look at these governments where we operate, and our team operates in a lot of different countries. I don't think governments can help themselves. I think they're gonna not have to, but they're gonna not be able to contain themselves, and they're gonna want to put parameters in place. And to be fair, there's a big movement and a big school of thought within the AI community, even on the tech community, that says you can't just let AI run on its own. You've got to have parameters in place and regulations and rules and things like that. I would think just for privacy issues, especially like, for example, in the United States where you and I are today, Darian, you've got these what they call HIPAA laws, which are privacy laws related to healthcare. So if you go to a hospital or a doctor, that information that they collect about you and your diagnosis and your overall care, that's all confidential, and they can't share that information with anyone other than you or anyone you designate. So I would think now if you have an AI tool and you are sharing that information with an AI tool in the United States, is that violating a HIPAA law? I don't know, because you're not sharing it with a human, you're not sharing it with a person, but you are sharing it with a tool that was created by humans and could be potentially misused by humans too. So that's a great question. I don't have a good answer for it. But if we have any attorneys listening, I'd love to hear their thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot to find out and I guess figure out for whether it's governments or other industries on what the regulations are going to look like for the AI industry. I know this is something we talk a lot about on this podcast, but I think it's something that is very relevant and interesting to dive into. So
Yeah.
our next newsworthy topic today is about Salesforce partnering with Amazon Web Services. This happened back in 2023, in November of 2023 in the US, but they are currently expanding. They just recently announced that they're expanding this globally and into the UK. So what this does is when Salesforce partners with Amazon Web Services, it introduces products like Data Cloud, Service Cloud, Sales Cloud, and other industry clouds to the Amazon Web Services marketplace. This collaboration aims to simplify the subscription and management of Salesforce solutions for all AWS customers, opening the door for use of pre-approved budgets and development of trusted AI applications for enhanced CRM experiences. This marks a huge step in the Salesforce and AWS partnership, accelerating the deployment of Salesforce products and technologies, Salesforce products and AI technologies. Eric, do you see additional benefits from the new advancements in this partnership, from them going from just in the US to now more globally?
Yeah, I do. I think a lot of the software vendors, the cloud software providers, are moving to this model where they use the hyperscalers. They use the AWSs of the world, or Azure, and they will use those as their partners, which makes sense. Why not leverage AWS? For those that don't know, it's Amazon Web Services. Amazon has built a massive cloud offering. In fact, a lot of people don't recognize that they are not only an e-commerce company, but they have a huge cloud offering as well. And so they allow cloud providers to use their infrastructure. So I think it's a great way to for software vendors to scale and to provide more reliable cloud-based delivery. I think the challenge, though, for customers is now you've got two different parties you're trying to manage. You've got the application provider that is providing the software technology, and then you have the cloud provider that's providing the infrastructure. So now you've got two parties to work with, which isn't the end of the world. It just adds to the complexity of, you don't have that single throat to choke now, where you can just go to one vendor who's providing infrastructure and software. And keep in mind, I know this is nothing different. This isn't like Salesforce is suddenly deciding that they're going to partner with AWS. They already have, and now they're just expanding that partnership. So it's not necessarily anything new. It's just that they're moving further in that direction of having a hyperscaler like AWS, and that's something you have to be aware of, like with with SAP too, for example. I know SAP allows you to choose what hyperscaler you want. Do you want AWS or Azure or whatever, which is great. It's flexibility, it's options for customers, but it's also complexity. So I think that's just the takeaway there is you've got to have the governance in place and the management in place, the vendor management in place to make sure that relationship is healthy for you.
Yeah, and you mentioned that this is something that's becoming really common. Do you see this being like best practices or just streamlined in the future that this will just essentially happen? Or where do you think that line is if it's going to be most common or just like happen majority of the time, but there'll still be other situations where it doesn't happen?
I don't know. That's a great question. I honestly don't know. I could argue both sides because I think on one hand, why, if you're Salesforce or SAP or any of these big tech providers, why try to build this massive infrastructure when that's not your core competency and someone else out there has already done it, and far exceeded what most could possibly do with AWS and Azure, for example. On the other hand, though, just maybe thinking a little bit longer term, I could see how a company like Salesforce or SAP might say, wow, that's a big cash cow that we're, paying out the door to a third-party provider. What if we did that ourselves? Could we make more money? So I think the larger application providers like Salesforce, SAP, Microsoft, not Microsoft already has their own hyperscale solution, but let's just say Oracle, for example, Oracle, SAP, Salesforce, Workday, all these big tech providers that have thousands and thousands of customers and mass amounts of infrastructure needs. I can see there maybe being a tipping point over time where it's more cost effective and more profitable for them to manage that infrastructure themselves. But that's pure speculation. But in the short term, I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think you'll continue to see more of it in the short term.
Yeah, definitely some interesting topics today. I think overall, there's a lot of different things that you could dive into, but overall, I think it's very interesting to see all the different newsworthy topics that are going on week to week.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for pulling those interesting topics out for us today, and look forward to continuing the discussion around AI. We're going to come back to AI again with our guest Lauren Ryder, who's going to be on the show here in just a moment. She's the CEO of a company called Leading Edge Global. She is based out of Australia. She's going to be joining us here from Sydney to talk about AI's impact on business operations and people. And then later in the show, we'll shift gears and go to Amsterdam and pull in our guest, Professor Hans Moulder, to talk about digital transformation success versus failure. So be sure to stick around. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Could you whisper in my ear?
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting and your host of Transformation Ground Control. I want to encourage you to read our Guide to Organizational Change Management. It's a free report or a free guide that we published. It's one that I actually wrote that talks about best practices and lessons learned as it relates to change management. So as you know, on this podcast, we cover a lot of stuff related to the human sides of change, organizational change management, including training, communications, org design, all kinds of stuff as it relates to change management. So if you're trying to learn more about change management or you're looking for more direction and ideas on how to get started on your change management strategy and your overall journey, be sure to check out this guide. You can read it by scanning the QR code on the screen in front of you or in the links below for this particular podcast episode. You can find a link to take you to the page that will allow you to register to go ahead and download that and read it for free. So be sure to check it out. It's the Guide to Organizational Change Management, written by yours truly. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think, and hope you enjoy the rest of this episode.
Yes, I'll do anything you ever dreamed to be complete. Yes, of nothing that's
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 167. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. This show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, an independent tech consulting firm that helps clients with digital transformations, including software selection, implementation planning, and implementation. And the show is produced by Major Tom Productions. I'm excited for our next guest who has never been on our show before. So we continue to bring on first-time guests, which I love doing because you always learn something new and get different perspectives here on the show. And Lauren Ryder is the CEO of Leading Edge Global based out of Australia. I'll let her describe what Leading Edge Global does, but they're a consultancy that helps clients with digital transformations. And she is going to be on the show talking about artificial intelligence's impact on business operations and people, which is a super fascinating topic to me. So excited for the conversation. So with all that being said, Lauren, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Eric.
I'm excited to have you on the show, and this is a super interesting topic. I'm really excited to get into it, excited to hear the audience's questions as well. But before we do that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? You've got an interesting background and an interesting business you run there in Australia. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks. My background has been in project delivery and change management, and then I was moving into transformation and running some quite large transformation projects across industries, starting in banking and finance, moving across to all sorts of industries, including things like construction and not-for-profits, all over, because a change is a change, as we know. When I started my business about 10 years ago, we were focused on digital transformation and really where that intersection of technology and humans are. So where that kind of, in tech speak, project management and change management, where they come together, but really it's how people engage with technology. And so that's where we grew our business. I know my business has been quite similar to yours, Eric. I know we've spoken in the past about this. So for those of you who know Eric's business, so we do a lot of ERPs and CRMs. But what's happened over time is that our clients are looking at more future-facing technologies. And we have found that looking at things like automation and now what we're calling AI has really been at the forefront. So it's not just about getting a new technology or a new platform in, but it's about how we can actually make our workforce more effective and more efficient with these new technologies. So we're spending a lot of time in that space with our clients and trying to help them to achieve those goals.
Yeah. Very cool. And you are also a podcast host too. I failed to mention that in the introduction here, but tell us a little bit about your podcast and why you're talking about it. I'm actually going to put up a QR code that anyone who's interested in listening to that podcast can find it on Apple Podcast, among other platforms. But tell us a little bit about the podcast, what inspired you to start it, what's it about, all that good stuff.
Sure. The podcast is called Leading Change. So in my dealings with CEOs, CIOs, CTOs, CFOs, all of the people who have been tasked by their board or the manager to actually lead a big transformation program, what I find is I was spending a lot more time coaching them on what they should be doing, what they should be saying, how they should be engaging their stakeholders, as opposed to actually supporting them through the change. And so I realized that actually there's a gap here. So no one gives leaders a formal handbook or a dummy's guide to leading change. And so I decided to create the podcast around that. And so I interview C-suite leaders about big transformations they've led. Often they are tech-led, but sometimes huge organizational restructures, BPOs, what have you. We've had one of every industry so far, and we're bringing in more. So really, it's how to lead change through an organization, how to get through the challenges, and to do it better when you are leading your next project.
Yeah, very cool. So it's called Leading Change. You can find if you scan that QR code right here, if you're listening or watching the video version, you can scan that QR code right there, right next to my head. If you want to find it on Apple, you can also search for it on YouTube, Spotify, and just about everywhere else that podcasts are available. And I've actually listened to a couple episodes, and you're a very good podcast host as far as just being very smooth and articulate. It's very soothing. Actually, I'm learning a lot, but it's also very calming and relaxing. I almost feel like I'm meditating and learning about change at the same time when I listen to your podcast. So nice work with that. And I hope it is doing well for you so far.
Thank you. No, it's actually been really good. And that's really cool feedback. So thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll leave that up there for a second, the QR code for those that might be interested in following that. But one question before we get into, all the stuff about AI, and this is more of just a kind of your personal journey with Leading Edge and in your company and some of the international work you've done. You're based in Sydney, Australia. You do work obviously in Australia, but you're also working internationally outside of Australia and other regions of the world. Maybe tell us a little bit about, some of the regions you're working in right now and how that's going for you so far.
Yeah, sure. So back in August, I learned about an opportunity in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia. They were having a huge country transformation. You know, we transform companies, but this was a country transformation. And from what I was hearing, it was a once in a lifetime opportunity. So I just jumped on a plane and went over to Saudi Arabia. There was and is huge amounts of opportunity to expand over there. So I spent time in Dubai, spent time in Saudi. I opened up a branch over there, and we've been doing work with big organizations, whether global or actually just based in those locations. It's been an incredible experience. I mean, the culture across the GCC is very different than most other countries that we deal with. Obviously, Dubai is a bit more Western. But Saudi Arabia just requires a lot more cultural understanding, you know, looking at things differently. They take things a bit slower than we normally would. It's more relationship based. So, you know, it's been a really interesting journey, just, you know, doing business overseas there, but just with a completely different culture. But yeah, if anyone is listening and they want to expand their business or at least just explore, I suggest grab a plane ticket and go to Saudi Arabia. It's incredible right now.
Yeah. And something I learned from you before we went on this podcast as we were prepping for it is some of the cultural and societal changes happening in Saudi Arabia in particular, and perhaps other Middle Eastern countries as well. And the reason this came up is my first thought when you said you went to Saudi Arabia to expand your business is, you know, not to make this a sexist conversation, but you are a female CEO. That's not the first profile I would imagine being something that would work in the Middle East. But from what you've told me, the things are changing there and there's more opportunity. Maybe tell us a little bit about that for those that may not know.
Yeah, absolutely. So as part of this Vision 2030, they have been changing a lot of the rules. So women empowerment is actually one of the pillars within the vision. And so what that means is they have now brought women into the workforce. A lot of the rules that they did have around women have changed and laxed. For example, women are driving now. They're going out without, you know, a husband, partner, brother, person with them. And so there is a lot more, you know, freedom in that regard. And they actually very highly educated, the Saudis. They actually spend a lot of time traveling overseas, London, US, Australia, and actually they're very highly educated. So you've got a lot of highly educated women who have been dying to get out into the workforce. And so it's really just this like big waterfall, which has been incredible. And part of actually one of the programs that I'm going to be running out there is about women in leadership and women in the workforce. And so, you know, bringing some of those experiences into them to support them. Look, as an expat, what's interesting is expats don't have to wear an abaya, you know, the long sort of dress coat or a headscarf. So I can actually wear, you know, what I want to wear, as long as it's conservative. So I'll wear, you know, clothes to my wrists, and then I'll wear pants or a skirt, long skirt. So it's about being respectful in their country, very much so. But as a woman in business, honestly, they are so respectful of me. And I can see in the comments, Min has asked, what did I enjoy most? And really, it's the welcoming bit of being in Saudi Arabia, of just, they are so happy to show us their country and just feel warm and welcome. But also the respect that I get as a business owner. And I don't think they see it as me being a female business owner. They, you know, they have the conversation with me just like they would a man. And so we talk about the business and the things that I can bring. And because I don't behave any differently than, you know, I come in like I would anywhere else. I think that's how it's been taken. So it's just been a great experience.
Well, it's very cool. So it sounds like a lot of opportunity there, and you're getting some traction there, which is great. So congratulations on that. That's awesome. So with the clients you're working with, what are some of the biggest ways that you're seeing AI and automation? I'm going to kind of lump those together, even though they're technically different technologies. But when you look at AI and automation, what are some of the major benefits that clients you work with are seeing now? I know there's a lot of long-term potential that maybe we haven't fully realized yet, but how are you seeing organizations benefit from those technologies now?
Yeah, look, I do think it's actually worth splitting it up and actually saying, when we say AI, these days people, you know, if you don't know anything about the tech, you know, all you think about is ChatGPT or, you know, DALL-E making your images. And it's really, it's really different than that. The technology has been around for a really long time. When I jumped into this area, it was probably, I'd say about 6-7 years ago. And that was when RPA was just starting, and, robotic process automation. It was literally just automating keystrokes. It was pretty straightforward technology. But that was, the first bots, the first, the PA that lived on your computer and made your job better. And so that was where we started. It moved into business process automation, where we would sort of start automating entire divisions. Finance was a huge example, customer service as well. And then we moved into sort of intelligent automation, where these bots actually could make some decisions, right? So if we have a mortgage application, you over this number, under this number, this is the way that we go. Again, the technology is actually not that complicated. It really is just getting your head around what it is. Now what we're talking about is generative AI and language models. And those are what I think companies are really looking into, how they can bring them in. I think where I'm seeing that is more in sort of the trial and error stage as far as bringing that in. Some companies have been doing it well and doing it well for a while. For example, customer service, chatbots, and customer service desks who get information in and learning about what the customer's saying so they can give them the right information back, or, suggest what they might need to have or know. Those are really great applications. And those are some really good customer service benefits. So if I think about, to answer your question about what are the real benefits, most people go in there looking for efficiency and productivity, right? So how can we do things quicker and better, and then obviously increase the bottom line? And as I said, I think finance is a really easy one to start automating. Customer service is a great one. Manufacturing has been doing it a long time. And so for a long time. And what we find, interestingly enough, and the benefits, one thing that a lot of organizations go in there, when we start writing a business case and we start looking at what are the Benefits of AI, and go, great, we can reduce our workforce by half, right? What we actually find is that initially that's not the case, and it shouldn't be part of your business case to initially, slash your workforce. What it actually is trying to do initially is to help your people be better at their job by taking off the really mundane tasks. And so if they have some help, then they can actually do better by the customer, be happier, be more productive in their job. So what we find, rather than actually kind of getting rid of entire divisions, which does happen, but generally what I see is more that people don't replace the people that have left. So you have natural attrition in any organization, but we find that once the company becomes more efficient, then and somebody leaves, that's when we start getting our savings. So there's a lot of, there are benefits, and they're kind of through, but I think employee satisfaction, customer satisfaction are really big ones that we see all the time.
Yeah, and also just being able to do more with the same amount of people you have. So even before people leave and you have that attrition that you don't necessarily replace, it seems like there's a lot of opportunity for organizations just to get more productivity and value out of the employees they have.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm here with Lauren Ryder discussing artificial intelligence and its impact on business operations and its people. I've got a lot more questions for Lauren, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstageconsulting.com.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Viva,
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 167. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is an independent tech-agnostic consulting provider that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. I'm here with Lauren Ryder from Leading Edge Global. She's the CEO of that company. She's joining us from Sydney to chat about artificial intelligence and the impact on business operations and people. And let's jump back into the conversation. Do you see, given that you work, for example, in Saudi Arabia and Australia, among other countries, do you see differences in AI adoption in different parts of the world, different levels of maturity?
There definitely is. And, I think countries, I know India is a huge adopter. I know that Meta just created a whole big AI, farming data center for them. They really are big adopters across India, across industries. UAE, definitely, as I said, they're a lot more, they're very Western, like other countries. They're forward thinking. I know Singapore is doing a lot in that space, and China. There's a few countries that are a bit behind. I know some of the European countries and just even having done research as I haven't worked there, but I know like Spain and France, I've been told they're not quite as advanced. Australia, and they're being here, not really huge risk takers in Australia. They like to see that other people in the world do it first. Right. So that's why in Australia, a lot of the take up was originally with just the process automation. It was pretty straightforward. And now they're seeing other people get benefits from sort of the more Gen AI, and that's what they're kind of looking at. But yeah, it's different. It's different adoption rates across the world. Interestingly, Saudi is doing a big investment in it, like things like Neom, the line, that really long building that goes on forever. They will be implementing stacks of really cool technology. I'm actually friends with one of the project managers there, and he was telling me it sounds amazing. But then if you go into their normal businesses, they're not quite ready for it there. So there's some business improvement. So I think there's pockets, which is probably true for most of the world.
Yeah. I'd be curious to hear from the audience, where are you seeing AI being used in businesses or regions that you might be in? I'd be curious to hear your feedback. So drop in the chat, what examples are you seeing of AI being used in businesses? Are you seeing it being used in businesses? And what part of the world do you see AI being more heavily adopted just based on your experience? I'd love to hear the feedback from the audience here. So you mentioned how, Australia and maybe parts of Europe are a little bit behind, or maybe you didn't use the word resistant, but perhaps they're a little bit resistant or skeptical of the technology. What do you think is causing that? Why are some organizations, some cultures, some parts of the world, why isn't everyone excited about AI and just going all in on the technology?
Well, I think the first one is investment. Look, it costs money to do this, right? And so that's number one. And I think that's probably the first start any business would look and go, how much should we invest? How much is this going to cost? And potentially it's taking them a while. They might be actually interested, but it might be taking them a while to get their business case together. But I think the real challenge is they don't know how to get started. And that kind of reflects off of a skills gap. So if leaders don't know where we should get started, what the things we should be focusing on, how do we know, if we're doing it right, where do we start? All of those questions, because if you've never done it before, it can be really confusing. So we've got that kind of skill gap in the leadership space. So that's where we get it kicked off. And then they have to look at their organization and go, okay, well, we've got a skills gap in the tech space as well. So do we hire people in? Do we partner with a company to do this? Do we upskill our existing resources? And so those are really big challenges around that kind of skills piece. So there really is a huge opportunity in this education space around both leaders and employees. I think, you mentioned resistance, and I think there is a bit of cultural resistance. I think that's probably more towards the front line, because I think managers would go, hey, this is really great. I can make more money on my P&L. But, there is always this fear of people losing their job. And, that can hinder the adoption. Absolutely. And so, there's a few ways around that to make that happen. And that starts with, with leaders starting with why are we doing this? What are we doing? Giving examples of how they've seen it work in the past, what it's going to mean for their job. Basic change management 101, right? Yeah. But I think, when we talk about it in a way that it's actually exciting and it's going to help them. I've heard companies, so they go, you're going to get a PA and you're going to be on your desktop and it's going to make you so much. And when it's said in a way like that, people do start to get excited. So a huge thing around kind of explaining that. Once we actually get into it, I think really the most important thing to get around that resistance is actually showing benefit early. And that's one thing that I think we see a lot of in general digital transformations, is that we spend a lot of time planning and getting it ready. We don't want to showcase anything until it's working.
Right.
But the challenge is, if we don't see it working, then how are we going to get the rest of the people on board? So what we say is, so if we say, why are people scared to get started? Well, don't think of it as a huge, big program. Think of it as, we're going to automate one process. We're going to pick the one thing that is, 80% of the process is great. 20% is causing us headaches, or whether it's our employees or our customers are complaining. How do we automate that piece, or just wrap tech around it to make it better? Get that, get some wins, get some big supporters, then write your business case, because you're going to have so much support off the back of that.
Yeah. And it's a good example of a type of technology where a more agile approach like that is probably going to make a lot of sense. Whereas, when you have a proven mature technology, like a new ERP system, for example, that's where, getting things right and carefully configuring and building the system before you deploy it, because it's somewhat predictable. I mean, more so than AI, that, you might have a different approach with ERP systems, but with AI, it's probably better just to, like you said, start small, just get some use cases built and some momentum built within your organization. And I love what you said about leaders too. Leaders have to not only state the why, why are we doing this? And if we're not going to lay people off, then say it. We are not going to reduce headcount. We are not going to eliminate jobs. But the question then becomes, well, if you're not going to eliminate jobs and you're going to make me more efficient, I'm smart enough to know that something's going to change and I don't know what it is. And so how do you see leaders struggle with that? Like, instead of me saying, Lauren, I'm going to automate 30% of your time now because you're going to use AI to make your job easier. I mean, you probably want to know, well, what am I going to do with that 30% of my time then if I free up that capacity?
Well, I have seen it done really well, where, and I think it stems from the fact that leaders seem to be really scared to share numbers. Like a lot of them I don't know why, cloak and dagger stuff. Whereas where I've seen it done really well is when they say, okay, here's our numbers. Here's what we're making. Here's what we want to make. Here's our goal. We're going to put this automation in place. We're going to be growing. And therefore, with that extra 30%, we're going to need you to do more work, right? But better work. And that's how we're going to do it. And so it's to hit targets, sales targets or revenue targets or margin, whatever targets you're looking for. But it's about that openness from leadership. And I think that, as I said, I think sometimes leaders are kind of scared of being wrong. Like, oh, if we put the wrong numbers out, what are they going to think? But actually what we find is the employees actually just like being part of it and knowing that, we're part of something and let's all go on this together. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it makes total sense. And what's interesting is the audience is commenting here on some things related to AI. Amin on YouTube says, I'm in Zagreb, and here in Croatia, it's not used a lot. So Croatia may be one of those Eastern European countries that's not as excited about AI or not as quick to adapt. Another interesting comment, a follow-up question here from Demelade. I'm probably mispronouncing your name. I'm so sorry. This is on YouTube. AI is now getting a lot of adoption in application development with developers. This adoption is likely to filter through to application users such as ERP analysts and implementations with time. And I think
absolutely. But developers are using it in the background for sure. I've heard lots and lots of great stories and examples of that. But it does need to filter back into the business. And I think, being able to showcase what you're doing and how you're getting there, it will help with that kind of cultural adoption piece within the organization to go, actually, if this is helping you, it might be able to help me.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So development, AI for copywriting of all sorts. This is from William on YouTube, GPT Playground and Perplexity. I use it a lot for copywriting myself, which I love because I love to write, but I love not writing, but still writing even more than I love writing.
I love outlines.
Yes, exactly. I like ideas.
You know what I want to say.
Exactly.
Someone just do the hard work for me.
Right. Exactly. It's pretty amazing. I'll be honest. how far it's come. And just in the last year or two, it's come so far in terms of its ability to create based on your own ideas. I take a lot of my YouTube video transcripts and I use that to create written documents, which ChatGPT is really good at.
Yeah.
This is interesting. You were talking about Saudi Arabia earlier. This is from Abo from YouTube. And Abo says, in Saudi Arabia, we're planning to be a hub for AI between East and West because of AI consuming a lot of energy, which we have, and our government supports this approach. So super interesting. I never heard that, never thought of that.
It is. And actually, I went to the LEAP conference. Abo, you probably were there as well. I think everybody, like it was like 200,000 people went to that conference in Saudi Arabia back just a couple months ago or last month. And it was huge. And there was an entire pavilion dedicated to startups. Someone I was with counted, there was about 600 little, when they got all the little booths one by one all lined up. I think he was counting, it was about 90-something% of them had AI in their name or on their wall. There is so much investment in Saudi Arabia in this area right now. So absolutely. And the data consumption is a huge challenge for the rest of the world, well, for everyone really. But it's great that Saudi can support that.
Yeah, and you look at Dubai and Saudi Arabia and some of the Middle Eastern countries that have historically relied on energy. They still have energy, but it's interesting is they're investing so heavily in technology and other economies to try and diversify and prepare for the day when there's not as much oil and there's not as much energy available in the region. So I think that's super interesting that they're embracing AI in that way. I'm here with Lauren Ryder discussing artificial intelligence and its impact on business operations and its people. I've got a lot more questions for Lauren, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. People oftentimes ask me how I built such a strong social media following on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and other outlets. And the fact of the matter is it took me a long time to build a following through a lot of trial and error, making a lot of mistakes. Had I known that there were companies out there that could help me build my brand, I would have done that a long time ago. I didn't know that, but the good news is that there is today a consulting firm that will help you through building your own personal brand through some of their training programs. The company is called Roloff Consulting, and if you're familiar with Emma Roloff, she's someone that I've had on this podcast before, and she's well known in the digital transformation space as well as the sales space, and she's big on TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And she and her husband have started a training course and a training company that focuses on helping people build their personal brands and helping them to sell themselves digitally. So whether you're a salesperson that's trying to reach more customers or you're an individual that's just trying to build your personal brand, that's something that they help with through their training programs. And they've offered listeners of this podcast a free 5-day LinkedIn challenge. And I encourage you to check it out. I've included a link below for this podcast. If you go to the podcast notes, you'll find a link that gets you free access to this 5-day challenge where you'll get step-by-step guidance. You'll get real results. So you'll get some tangible results from the program. And you also get a special offer at the end of it. So it's exclusive to listeners of this podcast. Be sure to check out the link below if you want to work on building your personal brand, or if you're in sales and you're trying to reach more people, whatever the case may be, check it out. It's free to listeners of this podcast. You can check it out via the link below.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology, independent, and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 167. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is an independent tech-agnostic consulting provider that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. I'm here with Lauren Ryder from Leading Edge Global. She's the CEO of that company. She's joining us from Sydney to chat about artificial intelligence and the impact on business operations and people. And let's jump back into the conversation. Here's a comment from Keith on LinkedIn. Keith says, I'm seeing private AI being applied in due diligence in vendor selection and performance monitoring. Private AI allows companies to apply semantic ontology and proprietary data sets across large organizations.
That you're absolutely right, Keith. And one area I've seen a lot of private AI coming through is in the legal industry. There's, so for example, you've got 600 pages of discovery that you have to read through and classify everything and put them into, as I say, data sets and figure out what we do with it. And so lawyers are feeding in hundreds and hundreds of pages, getting really useful information back, and then asking the AI to say, okay, well, what are some arguments that I could take to court for this, right? And so now the fact is, particularly in the legal industry where you have to get it right, we can't rely on the AI, I'm sure you heard the case back a few months ago when the lawyer got disbarred, I think in the US, for just referring to cases that didn't actually exist when their ChatGPT went rogue. But actually putting it within your organization and actually, absolutely programming it so that it makes sense, as you say, with your own proprietary information. Absolutely. And that actually does lend itself to, there is a big discussion about AI ethics and what we can and should be putting into our AI and so, knowing that we're putting it safely in our organization and not sharing, for example, customer data or health data outside. So there's a lot of value in that private AI.
Yeah. That's interesting. Like if you or I were to take our client list, let's just say, not that we'd ever do this, we take our client list and we put it into OpenAI and ask it to create a graph that, shows the logos of all of our clients. Does that client information now exist in the AI model that anyone could access? So I could go in and say, show me all of Lauren's clients, and it would be able to spit that back because it learned from me when I entered it. Is that, or it learned from you when you entered it?
I'm not sure. I don't think it's that exact, but basically once information is in there, it can be accessed. And I think it's just knowing that, and that's part of the education piece for employees, what you can and can't and what you should and shouldn't be putting into your AI.
Yeah. Super confidential IP type stuff. You probably don't want to start.
Data privacy, cybersecurity, all of those all get wrapped up in this conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Here's another interesting comment from Amin on YouTube again. Actually, I talked with 2 leaders that told me they don't want AI because their employees will be more productive and it will only make more coffee breaks, which kind of gets back to the point earlier. Like if you're going to make people more productive, give them something to do to replace that increased productivity.
Yeah, I would say that those 2 leaders might be able to benefit from a leadership development course.
Right. Yeah, it sounds pretty old school to me, but so be it. But well, good. What are some of the biggest challenges or obstacles to adoption that you see organizations face? I know we talked about how certain parts of the world and certain organizations are resisting it. But let's just say they're open to it and they're not necessarily resisting AI and some of the potential benefits. What are the biggest obstacles that you see with organizations that want to do it?
Yeah. So I think the first one is, and I think I referred to it earlier, is knowing where to start, knowing which piece should we go. So, there's a few different ways and you can call it like the problem definition or the thing that we need to solve. And so, there's different ways that we can go about it. And there's different methods that we take our clients through. Generally, we say, start with the customer. Where are you finding customer issues? What's bringing your NPS down? Find something there that you can go forward with. And then I think it's also, the big question is, what do we have that is special, that is different? Like in the finance industry, we call it our alpha, right? What's the thing that makes us outperform our competition on a normal day? Mm-hmm. And often that's something like special data set that you might have. An example that I like to give is a client, and they own and operate shopping centers. And so they have, which is, but they do advertising within it. And so how are they different from any other advertising? Well, they've got shoppers within a shopping center, and guess what? They've got apps, so they've got data information from their about their customers. They can see them walking through. They've got Wi-Fi, beacon data, all this data within the center about shoppers that no other ones of their competitors have. So suddenly That's our alpha. That's our thing that's going to make us outperform. So how do we then design our AI to be able to give us really useful information that's going to help us outperform by using that? And I think that's really important. And one of the challenges that comes through that is, okay, great. So we've got data. Where is our data? And, how is it, and I think that's, again, another stumbling block. So is our data structured? Is it unstructured? Where is it? Is it easily accessible? And then people kind of go, oh crap, does that mean I have to create a data lake? And, there's a lot of kind of, I think obstacles that people run up against. They don't have to be, but I think mentally there's a lot of blocks because I've run an IT project before, but this is different. So I think those are kind of some of the big ones. And then finally, always we bring in the people issue. And I think the culture piece is really, really important. And I think that, we what we do is we go in a company and say, you are now a innovative culture. This is who you are. Whether you put it, maybe we need to look at our values and actually, refresh those. But we are a company that looks to innovate, that looks to do things better, do efficiently, effectively, what have you. So that culture has to be through the entire organization. We can't just have a pocket, because what we know is data doesn't just touch one team. Like if we've got, a sales team making sales data, we've got a marketing team feeding things in there. And on the other side, we've got operations and, we've got all sorts of other pieces that in the finance team, everyone talks to one another. So business units don't operate in isolation. So you can't just have one team that's really innovative. And I think, infiltrating that culture means that the CEO has to be on board with this and they have to drive it. And again, can be a bit of a challenge. They can say, yes, I want it. Here's some money. But if they're not demonstrating and talking about it with their business, they're not going to get that kind of leverage.
Right. Yeah, that's super interesting. So cultural, allowing your culture to shift and to embrace the technology and be open to it is one. Amin, I'll just pop the comment up again just for the audience here, but Amin mentioned how, the leader that was afraid of AI because it'll make people more productive and then they'll just have more coffee breaks. I'd be curious to hear beyond, in addition to what Amin said here, what do you see as some of the biggest obstacles? This question's for the audience. What do you see as the biggest obstacles to AI adoption within businesses and enterprises throughout the world? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. If you're part of an organization, I'd love to hear whether or not your organization is embracing it. If you're a consultant, I'd love to hear how you see your clients embracing or resisting it. That's be good feedback to hear from you here. And this is from ZAC on YouTube. ZAC says, what about the risks of making smarter employees by using AI at the price of making more stupid organizations? If we do it the same way our competitors do, we will be just a flat copy of the others. So
I have spent many hours contemplating this and what the future of organizations look like. And to me, it's actually a little bit scary because, if I give some examples, so I have a friend who he runs a company here in Australia. It's like a swimsuit business. And he has an AI tool that they basically put in, this is what we're selling, this is the audience, upload some photos, and basically you hit go and it creates an entire marketing plan for this particular product, right? Now, when I spoke to him, that was probably about 6-8 months ago. So that was it. Now I'm seeing we've got AI that will actually take, you've got the photos, it'll actually write and it does includes your copy for your socials, but it can actually post your socials. It can measure your ROI. If you're not making enough money, it'll do your A/B testing. Basically, we've outsourced the entire marketing function, right? And you're absolutely right, Zach, that if we are all using the same tools, every single company will be marketing the same way. And so we have to then go back and think, okay, well, if we're automating those things, what are the things that we really should be using our human brains for? Yeah. And that's when we do have to make smarter organizations. And that's when our skill sets just start to change. And we need to train on higher level cognitive and social emotional skills on, how to make better decisions. A really important skill, how to, be more creative and work better and collaboratively, and to understand your customers at a deep empathetic level so that you can approach things differently than your competitor. So, those questions, those are the ones that keep me up at night. So,
yeah. Well, as you were describing that, Lauren, I couldn't help but think of, like, I was thinking to myself, what was the last major technological shift that might have been somewhat comparable to this? And it may, I feel like AI in my lifetime, at least in my opinion, AI has been the most significant technological shift. I don't remember anything quite this tectonic in the industry,
Well,
but
I think maybe when we moved to the cloud, when everything was
yeah,
suddenly cloud-based, because, I mean, you'd remember everything, we had all of our systems on site and now they're in the cloud. And the changes that a business would have to face is, suddenly, again, we're other than, a little bit of change, we basically have to use the same program as everyone else, right? Because
yeah,
we're at the whim, with the mercy of, and suddenly we think we've lost, our competitiveness. But look, organizations have adjusted and adopted, and it's not like that, even though we
yeah,
are all in the cloud. And
yeah.
so I
Sure.
think people are smart enough to be able to shift and adapt.
I'm here with Lauren Ryder discussing artificial intelligence and its impact on business operations and its people. I've got a lot more questions for Lauren, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. I recently published my first book. It's called The Final Countdown: Strategies to Reach the Third Stage of Digital Transformation. And I wrote this book because I really wanted to find a concise way to share some of my knowledge around digital strategy and how to get started on a digital transformation journey. So in this book, I cover 3 different sections. I cover the people, process, and technology aspects of transformation, with the idea that it's meant to be a starting point, a launching pad for organizations and team members that are going through digital transformations. So I encourage you to buy this book. You can get it electronically, you can get it paperback, or you can get it in hard copy, as I'm holding here in front of you. You can get it by going to thefinalcountdown.com. You can also search for it on Amazon if you shop at Amazon. Otherwise, just go to thefinalcountdown.com. Love to hear your feedback on this book as well. So I hope you check it out and hope you enjoy.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me or visit our website for more details.
These things take time, mom and dad, they have a good life. But what am I gonna do with mine?
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 167. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is an independent tech-agnostic consulting provider that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. I'm here with Lauren Ryder from Leading Edge Global. She's the CEO of that company. She's joining us from Sydney to chat about artificial intelligence and the impact on business operations and people. And let's jump back into the conversation. Well, when you think about, like, in the 90s when the internet was first, even before a cloud, the precursor to the cloud obviously was the internet. And you think about, like, the big changes that the internet entailed. That entailed a certain amount of automation that came with the internet, a certain amount of open access to knowledge and sharing. And we suddenly, as a human race, over the last 25, 30 years, have become exponentially smarter in a faster, shorter period than, decades or centuries before us. So you'd think, well, maybe the internet was similar in that, that you could have said the same thing about the internet. It's going to make us all equal. It's going to make businesses equal because now all of a sudden we're all accessing the same information, the same data. But that's not the case. I mean, there's still winners and losers and some that outperform others. So I've got to think the same is going to be true with AI. It's going to be, in the short term, I think it's going to be people that embrace AI and figure out how to use it to their advantage in the short term. Longer term, as your competition catches up, of course, then you've got to keep innovating and figuring out new ways. But I think you're right. I think the human component can't go away. I don't see how it could. I think it's just going to, like you keep saying, it's going to change your job and change the skills that you need in this post-AI world that we're in right now.
Well, that's right. I mean, I've got teenage kids. I tell my 17-year-old daughter, I said, the job that you're going to have doesn't exist today.
Yeah.
So things are changing. And I do think it's really just falls down to human nature. As you said, the internet, we adapted. The cloud, we adapted. And people just want to win. People want to do better. They want to improve themselves, right? And so we will find ways around it. That's just human nature.
Yeah. Here's another question on YouTube from Amin. Thank you for all the questions I mean, and after all these questions, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. So, because if I'm saying it wrong, I've said it wrong many times. But the question here is a BCG, Boston Consulting Group study showed that learned language models make individuals more productive. But when it came to a group, it makes it the opposite. So it's making groups less productive. Have you seen anything along those lines, Lauren, or is that?
I haven't seen that study. What I can say is, when I do sort of introduce and talk about this, I say, these LLMs and the Gen AI, the tools that we use are great for personal productivity. And so, and that's exactly what I call them. They're personal productivity tools. And what I talk about is enterprise AI. And so to me, I see it actually, they're different. It's a different conversation. So yeah, I can see how that study would give you that information. I mean, when it says when it comes to a group, I don't know if they're saying they're using the same kind of tool together, or whether it's something like, as I mentioned, a great, that customer service example where they start learning through what the customers and the employees are putting in, and they learn what to do. And yeah, that would make people less intelligent, because you get fed the information. So if you're sitting at a customer service desk and the language model has learned for you, of course you don't need to be creative, because somebody calls in for a password reset and it's heard it, it knows it, the password reset's already in the person's inbox without you having to do anything. Absolutely, you're not going to be doing any more work than you have to. So if that's what that study's referring to, I get it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I'm going to keep rolling with these questions here because they're really good ones here. This is from YouTube as well. How do you answer an employee that is reticent to AI who tells that being more productive is to make ourselves work more? So in other words, do you think employees might resist AI because we're just going to ask them to do something different, automate part of their job, and take on more responsibility?
Look, resistance comes in all forms. So as we know, when we're rolling out change, some people are going to be early adopters, some people are going to sit on the fence and wait, and some people are going to dig in. And and there's active resistance and there's passive resistance, and it sounds like this person is actually quite actively resistant. And I would say that those are actually the easiest people to deal with in an organization, because you know exactly what their problem is. So you start using some really great questioning techniques. I don't know, like the 5 why. Why do you think that? Why? Get them down to the real essence of why they're actually saying this. Because what they're saying is be more productive, make ourselves work more. Why do they think that? Because this could be something that is some sort of unconscious bias they've had since they were a child about, the nature of work. Well, that's cool. We can work around that. Right. But, if we can address the why they actually feel that way, that's actually easy. And then, as I said, the next big step is to demonstrate, actually show them, because at some point they're going to go, I still don't like it. Okay, you know what? Let's get this one out. Let's pilot it, or just show it. Just do the first one, shall we say. Next, we've got it. We've got you on board. How cool is that?
Yeah. Very, very true. And I agree with the active resistance in some ways is easier to deal with because it's so obvious. It's on the surface. It's not hidden. There's no passive aggressive nature to it. Typically it's something you could tackle head on. This is just more of a comment from William on YouTube. He says clients will resist AI the same way they resist everything else. So he's not the glass half full kind of guy when it comes to AI. It sounds like he's glass empty perhaps when it comes to people's acceptance of AI. But you could be right. We'll find out over time. I remember when when I was a kid, my parents worked at Digital Equipment Corporation, and they were, which no longer exists, but at the time it was a fairly big computer manufacturer. And I remember when robotics were first coming around in the 80s, and it was becoming kind of a big deal for manufacturing. And they were introducing robotics on the manufacturing floor of Digital Equipment. And I remember the fear that I heard from my parents, but I also heard it from others. Even as a kid, I remember everyone was sort of afraid that the robots were going to take all the manufacturing jobs. And even today you look and you're like, that hasn't really happened. There's a ton of robotics now on manufacturing shop floors, but it's totally changed what it means to be a manufacturing shop floor clerk or a warehouse clerk. Your job's different. You're not, it may have eliminated some over time through attrition, like you mentioned, but I feel like it's just changed it and people have had to adapt to it. And for the most part, I think they have.
And I've had a really great example recently. I met with this guy. They're one of the biggest farmers in Australia, but they're particularly the biggest tomato farmer, or tomato for our American viewers. And so they've actually built robotics through their entire a greenhouse, call it greenhouses. I say it's huge. And so they've got these robots running back and forth, and they're fertilizing. Initially, they're going to be picking. They're going to be doing all sorts of farm work. And so I said to him, obviously, my first question is, okay, so what about your workforce, right? Because right now they have people walking around fertilizing tomato plants. And so what do we do? So it turns out, for something like farming, they, I don't know if anyone across the world knows this. If you do want to come to Australia, we have visas where you can actually come and pick fruit and vegetables at farms. And so it's pretty cool. And so he said, basically, we don't have to necessarily run that program anymore because we don't need people to come and to pick and to fertilize. However, he said, the staff that we have, what we're doing is we're upskilling them. And we're training them how to manage the robots, and they're really just putting them through education programs. So there are, they're saving the money of not hiring the people on an annual basis, but then they're also giving upskill and giving people, new jobs for the future, which, because you can take that to any other farm after that.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. Rolling with the changes for sure. Now you mentioned before, Lauren, you talked about culture and the importance of shifting a culture to be more in line with adopting AI and even other emerging technologies. But beyond that, what are some of the biggest impacts on people at organizations that are deploying AI initiatives?
Yeah, so I think, the first one is we need to make sure we're structured the right way. And the thing is, there is no right answer for this one, because as you know, you'd work in an organization where IT is centralized or it's not, or, we outsource or we don't. There's all sorts of different ways that a company can structure their business. But, there are a few options. And I think, one that works really well is having some sort of an innovation team who sits, who runs that with the data. You might already have a data team. And we actually bring some innovation into that. So they're actually responsible for the culture, but also for the data and how we actually roll that out. So having that kind of leadership level that's actually driving that change as far as people impacts, I think that is a really sort of necessary function. So it might not be an individual role, but you might give that as a job to somebody who already exists. So I think that's really big. I think, I suppose, so some of the other kind of things that are impacting people, I think it's the structures, I think, are the big one, and how we actually work within the organization and with our robots. So mapping that out and understanding what our job role is today and then what our job role is in the future. So we've kind of got two parts of it. One's the management and the delivery. So do we have an in-house team? Do we outsource? All of that sort of thing. But then we've got the people who use it. And what does that mean? And so, so as I said, this is not an isolated thing. We bring HR in for this, because if people's jobs roles are changing, we need to make sure that that's included, and maybe their KPIs need to change as well because of what they're doing differently. So I think, when it comes to people, we have to look at every single impact from every single side as we roll it out.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And, identify what the change impacts are, and, how processes are going to look, how exactly they're going to use AI, what they shouldn't do, what are the parameters, per your point earlier. If you've got confidential information or IP, you want to make sure you're not using open AI models for that. So it's just, kind of defining people's jobs, their roles and responsibilities, and setting those expectations. It's really no different. In a lot of ways, it's no different than deploying ERP or CRM or a financial and accounting system. I mean, it's kind of the same thing. It's just different technology. And different
it's the same thing, but with nuances, right? And so you have to go, okay, well, I always say, we start with strategy and planning. Okay, that's great. But again, as I've mentioned, how do we choose what we actually going to automate, or what technology are we going to use? Where are we going to find our data? How are we going to structure organization people? How is our adoption going to work? So all of the areas that we look at on any single project. But as we've discussed, we just have some AI nuances that we need to weave through as we roll it out.
I'm here with Lauren Ryder discussing artificial intelligence and its impact on business operations and its people. I've got a lot more questions for Lauren, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstage-consulting.com.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 167. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is an independent tech-agnostic consulting provider that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. I'm here with Lauren Ryder from Leading Edge Global. She's the CEO of that company. She's joining us from Sydney to chat about artificial intelligence and the impact on business operations and people. And let's jump back into the conversation. You know, you said you've spent a lot of time contemplating and thinking about how AI might it neutralize or level the playing field for organizations or make organizations look more similar in the future. Aside from that, you know, how do you predict that organizations will adjust to AI and other emerging technologies in the coming years? Like, what do you, if you were to get your crystal ball out, what do you see happening with AI within the enterprise and business space?
Yeah, so I think so. I actually heard this incredible story about this team that wrote some sort of an AI that created an organization, had a CEO, a CFO, a CMO, I don't know, developers, etc. And they set it to go, and they all spoke to one another. They created a company, they created a business idea, and then within something like 42 seconds, they had a working website that could actually do, trading, right? So if we look at that as the future, that businesses, could be fully automated, like 100%, do we even need it? And I will tell you, just on that story, apparently the CEO didn't have much to say.
Oh, really?
That was good.
Yeah.
So if we look at it with that as the obviously clearly extreme lens on, what does that actually mean for organizations? And I think what we need to do, what we're going to see is a real culture shift. And it's going to have to be across industry, and it's going to have to be, we're digital workers first, right? We look at, process automation and ethical automation, and this is who we are, and this is how we engage, and this is how we can better serve the customer. And our first thought is, how do we do that using AI? And that, I think, is how businesses are going to shift in the future. And if I give a different example, because obviously people will still need to exist, because if we give an example, there's a cafe, right, that's actually put in ordering through their chatbot. And so we still have to have human interaction. We still need food. We still need, service. Right. So if you put that chatbot in and somebody walks in and they sign into their app and they put in their order, right? So first of all, the order is more efficient for the customer. They can get like personalized recommendations. Oh, you ordered a latte yesterday. Do you want a latte with caramel today, or whatever? Or they just suggest what you already have. They know you, right? And they can upsell you, right? What I love about that is we suddenly have data on when people are buying, how often. So we know how many staff to put on. We know how much milk we've just gone through. So we know exactly how much to order so that we don't have any wastage anymore. Right. So there's all sorts, and we can then start marketing to people because we know all of this information. And so I think, when we're talking about the business of the future, and as I say, how can we bring AI into every single part of your business? That is it. We take it as a coffee shop and we take all of that. We take data-driven decision-making at a core. And then we say, how are we going to drive data into every single part of our customer experience? That's, I think, the way to really look at it.
Yeah. And even if you do assume for a moment that AI could level the playing field or equalize organizations and teams and people, it's a little misleading, because the ones that really succeed with AI and are going to get more out of AI are the ones that handle the leadership and adoption and the change better than others. They're the ones that are going to have better data. So the ones that are able to actually leverage clean data and make those AI models and algorithms more effective and accurate and that sort of thing, there's still going to be disparity there, because I would think, because even just because the technology on the surface is available to everyone, if you don't have the data and the adoption and the processes built to use it, that's going to be the new competitive advantage. It's not going to be the fact that you're using AI. It's going to be the fact that you were able to use it better and integrate it into your operations better. Similar to ERP systems, you look at ERP systems, you could argue that anyone who uses SAP or Microsoft D365 or whatever, you could argue that they're all equal. They're all that eventually is going to make them all perform at a par level, but that's not at all what we're seeing. We're seeing that some organizations completely fail in their deployments. They don't get value out of it. We see others that are wildly successful, and then you see a lot in between. So I'd imagine it would be similar with AI and it's going to take decades to see that shake out, I would imagine.
Absolutely. And it goes back to that skill set and the leaders and the skills inside the business. Absolutely. Yeah. You've got it, then use it, leverage it, drive it. As I said, pop it into your KPIs and people will actually perform.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask one more question from the audience, and then I've got another kind of a closing question for you, Lauren. But this is from, I don't know if it's Zach or ZAC. I'll call him ZAC just because he put it in all caps, but he or she, I'm sorry, I don't know for sure that's he or she. But on YouTube says, how about this new role of the chief AI officer? That's something that we haven't talked about yet, but that does seem to be an emerging and an increasingly common role and executive title. What are your thoughts here? Are you seeing this become a real thing?
I am one of the people that AI is a buzzword. AI is the word of the moment. The first person who says it in a conversation wins bingo, right? So, look, I think the chief AI officer is what the chief transformation officer should be. If you really are in charge of transforming your business, you should be putting an AI hat on and actually have that as part of your remit. Now, if there is no chief transformation officer, if there is no sort of chief technology officer, and that's all we've got, and that person looks after the rest, okay. But I don't see it as a separate role to somebody who actually already has the job to roll out new technology. So whether that's a CIO or otherwise, I do get the idea that we need to put, some companies, and I've said we need to change the culture. We need to show that we are in with this. Is that a chief AI officer? Okay, maybe. I haven't really seen it coming through much yet. But as I said, Australia is often behind. This might be more of an American thing coming through.
Yeah, I've seen it intermittently or occasionally, but it does seem like it's becoming more common. But I tend to agree with you. I mean, it's sort of like if you had a chief cloud officer right now. Okay, maybe, but like in 5 years, we're not going to be talking about the cloud, not because the cloud's not relevant, but just because that's just the way it is. I mean, we're all in the cloud, so big deal.
Yeah.
You know, we're done migrating to the cloud. Now it's just about technology and general transformation and stuff. So
that's right. Yeah. I mean, look, if it's the way that a business needs to spotlight that this is important to us by putting a person in that role, well, then, you know, more power to them, and maybe that will help. But I don't see it as a long-term solution. Maybe it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll share this comment before I ask you my last question, just mainly to get you motivated and psyched to answer my last question here. But this is from John on YouTube. Says, double down on purpose and people. The technology is an enabler. Building and sustaining organizational capability is the key. Very well captured, Lauren. So I think it's safe to say John is a fan of this conversation with you, Lauren. So thank you for that. So, and then actually I have to share this too, even though I keep saying it's the last one. This is from John as well. Chief Happy Officer, latest CXO. So that is not a bad idea.
Yes, I love that one. Isn't that what we're trying to do? We're trying to get happy employees and happy customers. I mean, that's the hallmark of a great business. And so, yeah, Chief Happy Officer. That means we automate everything. Go for it.
Exactly.
Love it.
So just to sort of bring this all full circle and put a bow on it, what are your recommendations in sort of first steps for an organization or a team that's thinking about AI, or they're not sure how to get started? Where do you recommend your clients get started in their journeys to AI?
Yeah. So my first thing is, don't start with the technology. Leave that. Start with your problem. Start with your problem statement, your problem definition. As I say, it's easier to start with a customer problem than it is anything else, or if you have some serious inefficiencies in your business. So find out, where that 20% that really is a real challenge area, and start looking at that. And it also look at your data, look at what you've already got, understand what you can take and what you can leverage. I think, if you are challenged, one thing that we do is we run a workshop with our clients where we actually workshop through all of these questions. We have a whole, way we look, what do our business needs? Well, what is our ROI going to be? Where are we going to start? All of those sort of questions that we work through. And also, what technology do you already own? You might already have AWS or Microsoft. Is that the right platform for you to start on? Maybe, maybe not. So there are a lot of questions that come through, but I say just start with understanding what your problem is, and then it'll take off from there.
Right. It's great advice. That's a great place to start. And I think if we sort of take the buzzworthiness away and just back up and look at our business and the problems and what we're trying to accomplish, I mean, it really, for any technology, it comes back to that. What are you trying to accomplish? How are you going to get your people on board? And then how can you selectively use technology in the right ways to make your business better? So it's really no different. The good news is there are nuances, like you said, but it's not that different than how we've adapted and tried to figure out how to use other technologies over the years. So that's very cool. So tell us the best way to learn about you. I'm going to share on the screen here. I'll share a QR code that'll take you to Lauren's company's website. But what are the best ways to connect with you personally on social media, or what's your preference?
Sure. So find me on LinkedIn. That is my prime platform. We do have some others, but that's where you're going to find me. So just look up Lauren Ryder and go ahead and connect. Would love to have a chat and continue the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's Ryder, R-Y-D-E-R too. If you look her up, make sure you spell Lauren's L-A-U-R-E-N and Ryder's R-Y-D-E-R. Just to make sure you get the right Lauren Ryder, based out of Sydney, Australia. So, well, great. Well, thanks for being here, Lauren. This is a great conversation. Super fun. You're a great guest. You're an even better podcast host. So do check out her podcast. When you get a chance on Apple Podcast, YouTube, etc. Love to have you back again and continue this conversation, because we could have gone for hours longer. So thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Lauren. Great stuff. Appreciate having you on the show and hope to have you on again soon. Thank you to the audience questions. There's some great topics we covered there, and got a lot more to cover here, though. First, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control. My name is Eric Kimberling, and I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to invite you to learn a little bit more about Third Stage Consulting, who we are and what we do. We help clients through their entire digital transformation life cycles, beginning with digital strategy, software evaluation and selection, all the way through and including implementation planning, implementation readiness, and the actual implementation itself. We're technology agnostic, so we only represent our clients' best interests. We do not represent software vendors. But having said that, we work very closely with software vendors, all the leading players that you can imagine we've worked with, both in helping clients evaluate and select them, but also in helping clients implement those solutions as well. So we have a very broad, objective, agnostic view of the market that is meant to really represent your interest as you go through your digital transformation. I also encourage you to scan this QR code right here to get access to our resource center. This resource center has a ton of information, ton of ebooks that are free. You have access to top 10 software rankings, playbooks for how to make your project more successful, guides to change management, YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff that are going to help you through your digital transformation. So I encourage you to scan this QR code to get access to those resources. And please feel free to reach out to me directly to brainstorm ideas about your project. Even if it's just informally, you want to bounce around some ideas and get some informal advice, I'd be happy to spend some time with you. So feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. You can also find it in the description field of this video as well.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello and welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 167. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Chwialkowski, and we just had Lauren Ryder on the show discussing artificial intelligence's impact on operations and people. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from that conversation, Darian?
Yeah, I think it's super fascinating to see how different countries are really positioning themselves in the AI space that's developing so rapidly right now. Especially, it sounds like Saudi Arabia is really making like an effort to expand their businesses and try and be a leader in this field. So I think that was an interesting thing that I didn't know before this interview. So it was really fun to learn that from her. One question that I did take away from this conversation was, I don't know if we've ever discussed this before. I know we've discussed how AI is going to affect the industry and what people can expect. I know Lauren kind of touched on this, but how do you see the role of employees evolving, and what skills do you think employees will become more important for employees or valuable for employees in the future with an AI-driven workplace?
Yeah, great question. I think first and foremost, the data science discipline will become more and more prevalent. I was just at a few weeks ago, we took our older son to visit colleges in different campuses throughout the United States, and we visited several different campuses, and we were on these panel discussions, where they have students that are at the college and they talk about how much they love it and why they picked the school and all this good stuff. And I remember this one panel had 5 kids on it, all different majors, like one was marketing, one was biochemistry or something, and one was government affairs. They all had these different majors, but every single one of them said their minor was data science, which I found really interesting because it wasn't just business or computer science type people. These were just kids that were studying all different kinds of stuff. And I had been trying to convince, it was kind of funny because I was trying to convince my older son that you should think about data science at least as a minor, take some classes in it, no matter what you do. He wants to do finance and sports management. And I said, well, even with that, you should still know data science, especially sports management, because if you're going to, manage a professional team or be involved in professional sports, data is a big deal. And that whole Moneyball movement in sports and analyzing data and understand who the, up and coming players are or whatever, you're increasing your odds to win. And he said, no, I don't need data science. It's not, no one really studies that. So it was nice to go to this panel and have all 5 kids on this panel all say they're minoring in data science. So I think he's starting to soften up a bit. But the reason I bring it up is I think that is an area that, and I'm not just saying this because my son listens to this podcast, because he doesn't listen to the podcast, but if he did, I would say the same thing, which is, data science is a really important area to be in. So I think that's the biggest thing, is that it's going to require a knowledge and understanding of data science. And it's also going to, I think, create a higher level, strategic level of thinking that a lot of employees don't have right now. If you think about time that the average employee spends looking for information or doing something manual, that in the future will be automated or become part of an AI model. That's going to change to where now, instead of looking for data or manipulating data, now I'm going to think more. I'm going to use the data that's been given to me by AI, and I'm going to make decisions, or I'm going to think more strategically. So I think it's going to change jobs quite a bit, not just in terms of the skills you need in data science, but also just the strategic thinking skill set's going to become even more important.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. I think those kids on the panel you definitely deserve to give them a little fist bump or something for that dad win there.
Yes, total win, total dad win.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, so that's good stuff. I mean, I like that interview, and I always love to chat about the intersection of technology, people, process, and what we just talked about with Lauren was exactly that. I think there was a great overview. So excited for our next guest, Professor Hans Moulder, who is going to be on the show back-to-back episodes. He's going to be on here in just a moment. We're going to play you a clip of an interview I did with him while I was in Amsterdam. He agreed to be on camera and allowed me to interview him to discuss his experience and his research as a professor, as a consultant, as an IT expert witness, and also as a researcher. He does a lot of stuff with the research. So I wanted to chat with him to talk about some of the high-level themes that differentiate between digital transformation and ERP success versus failure. And this is meant to be a prelude to a deeper dive conversation we're going to have live on this podcast next week. He's going to join as sort of the primary guest, and we're going to spend more time talking next week. But in the meantime, we thought we'd play you this clip because it's a good overview, and it would be a good preview for some of the stuff we'll get into next time, because I love the study and the data behind why projects succeed versus fail, and he's got a lot of good case studies and data to go with there. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll bring on Professor Hans Moulder, Dr. Hans Moulder, who is a professor, will be on the show here in just a moment. So be sure to stick around. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
My name is Eric Kimberling, and I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to invite you to learn a little bit more about Third Stage Consulting, who we are and what we do. We help clients through their entire digital transformation life cycles, beginning with digital strategy, software evaluation and selection, all the way through and including implementation planning, implementation readiness, and the actual implementation itself. We're technology agnostic, so we only represent our clients' best interests. We do not represent software vendors. But having said that, we work very closely with software vendors, all the leading players that you can imagine we've worked with, both in helping clients evaluate and select them, but also in helping clients implement those solutions as well. So we have a very broad, objective, agnostic view of the market that is meant to really represent your interest as you go through your digital transformation. I also encourage you to scan this QR code right here to get access to our resource center. This resource center has a ton of information, a ton of ebooks that are free. You have access to top 10 software rankings, playbooks for how to make your project more successful, guides to change management, YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff that are going to help you through your digital transformation. So I encourage you to scan this QR code to get access to those resources. And please feel free to reach out to me directly to brainstorm ideas about your project. Even if it's just informally, you want to bounce around some ideas and get some informal advice, I'd be happy to spend some time with you. So feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. You can also find it in the description field of this video as well.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 167. My name is Eric Kimberling, here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of the show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also view past episodes of the show at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. So I'm excited for our next guest on the show, Professor Hans Moulder, who is a professor at University of Antwerp. I got a chance to meet him while I was in Amsterdam a few weeks ago. And we had a great conversation that we caught on camera where I asked him a bunch of questions about ERP success versus failure and what some of his research shows along those lines. So with that being said, let's roll the clip of my interview with Dr. Hans Moulder. So I'm here with Professor Hans Moulder to discuss the million-dollar question, which is why do some digital transformations succeed and why do some fail? And Professor, first of all, thank you for joining today.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Eric.
Absolutely. So before I jump into these tough questions I've got for you about transformation, success versus failure, maybe just tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, it all started with my dad, who was working for a digital equipment corporation in Boston in the 1970s, so more than 50 years ago. And then he started his own company doing implementations, and then it went wrong. So the law of Murphy came by, and we wanted to know why are we not succeeding in our digital transformations. So that led for me to a different course. I was not an expert as my dad was by having a course of 2 weeks writing code. Now I had to do high school, university, PhD to get the right level of understanding what makes a project successful.
Right.
And now I'm a professor at different universities. One of which is the University of Antwerp, where I'm lecturing about IT management, IT projects. And I'm also doing work for the courts as an expert for the courts. And then the courts expert has to say this is a good or a not so good project. And that's a hard question. That's a million-dollar question indeed, Eric. So we had to do some counseling. We went to Boston, we went to Harvard, we went to MIT, and we met the people of the Standish Group, which were doing research already then and have a database of more than 120,000 case studies on IT projects. Oh, that's interesting.
That is interesting.
That's interesting. And then we figured out that it can go right, but most likely if you don't do it right, it goes wrong. And that is the reason I'm here today, to talk with you about the research of the universities, but also about the research of the Standish Group in Boston.
Right, absolutely. And I'm also curious, in a moment, I want to ask you some questions around your expert witness experience and compare notes, because I do expert witness work, you do expert witness work. It'd be good to compare findings there. But before we jump into expert witness lawsuit-related discussions, what about your research? Your research, are there certain themes, high-level themes or summarizations of what causes a success versus a failure in a digital transformation?
Yeah, it is. So I was asked by the Dutch Parliament in 2014, and they asked me what is the top 3 of success factors or failures. And according to research, it is about people, people, and people. Only 3% is about technology.
3%.
3%.
Yeah, that's even lower than I would have thought.
That's very low. So I have seen terrible software systems implemented beautifully. I have seen beautiful IT systems implemented worse. So what we can see here is that the human factor is very much important. And from the IT perspective, that is odd, but from the perspective of the business, it is very normal. So what we have seen, and that is what we are trying to figure out now, is how to have continuous change. That's one of the research topics we have. I think that Agile is very much a solution for IT, but I think that we should have flow for the enterprise. Continuous change on a daily basis. And of course, IT is of the greatest importance.
Right, that's very interesting. And that 3% is almost shocking, that it's only 3% related to the technology, because it appears, in my experience, as though an overwhelming amount of investment financially and resource-wise goes into the technology, the 3%, and not enough focus on the 97%. Is that something you've seen in your experience as well?
I've seen the same as you have, but we have seen that most of the budget is going to meetings.
Interesting.
Meetings, so people are talking about the technology, how to make the decisions about how to implement the technology. And if you can see the budgets, I think that could be vice versa. It could be if we have less meetings, more intensive meetings, then we could reduce, I think, the overhead of the projects with more than 20-30%. So I think that if we're looking at the real cost, the hidden cost, and Standish has written about papers about it, the hidden cost, it's almost likely that we have about 30-40% of meeting time which we could very much invest elsewhere.
Now, I've heard you discuss in other sessions and hearing you speak in the past, I've heard you discuss decision latency, this concept around decision latency and how that contributes to failure or success.
That's true.
What is decision latency and how does that affect a digital transformation?
Yeah, that was actually a finding. So when we work at the standards group on a case basis, and we saw that some projects had a decision issue. Namely, when you request from the project to the board for some change in the program, it took them more than 6 weeks to get an answer. And what are people doing in that 6 weeks? Waiting? Well, let's do something else.
Right.
And then the preferred answer after 6 weeks was opposite of what they expected. So they had to reverse all the decisions that were taken in the last 6 weeks, and it became worse and worse and worse. So we saw that decision latency is actually not about the quality of the decision, but the timing of the decision. And we're looking at sports, you can see the same in sports. It's about the timing. So it should be able to have a decision in a day. But how are we organized in that way? That is the difficult part of it.
Right.
So we have seen that it is a very good indicator, decision latency, especially when we relate it to 3 things, namely the organization. We talk about a good organization which is able to adapt to the change. We have the good team, which are the real working horses. They're working to make the change happen from the good team. But actually there's a third independent factor, which we call the good sponsor. And the good sponsor is not overseeing, but is inspiring, is daydreaming, is articulating the vision, is making the organization as a soul, seeing what are we going to do? What is the real necessity of this project? And we have seen that decision latency is an indicator. If the decision latency takes more than 2, 3, 4 weeks to get an answer from those 3 bodies, well, then actually the chances are very low.
Right.
So there are indicators. And it also leads me to another thing which is nice of research. If you have a database of 120,000 case studies, and you tell me I'm going to start this project, then I'm going to figure out what are your dimensions. Well, I have a team of 50 people. So I'm looking in the database. Give me all the projects of 50 people. You're working internationally. Give me all the projects which are international. I'm working in manufacturing. Okay, so there's 3,127 projects. They are lookalikes of your ideas. Do you want to know your chances? What are your odds? Well, your odds are about that you're going to fail for 44%. What should we change in our plan to increase our chances? So that is why I'm very much interested in the statistics.
Right.
Because, of course, we have lies, big lies and statistics. But the other way around, statistics are also a way to discuss those odds and see what really needs to change. And what we have seen is you don't have to change the spreadsheet. You have to improve the skills. You have to improve the skills of the good sponsor, the good skills of the team, and the skills of the organization. That are the things which works fine. So it is not that you can start from day one with a skilled team. The team has to know each other, how to work, how to behave.
Right.
And that's what we call emotional maturity. So when looking at this kind of data, we are not going to talk only about what is your business case, what is your spreadsheet. I want to know you. How do you are fitting in the project? Do you know each other's first name? No, we never worked before. Okay, that's right. But then I don't want to have results in one day. I have to wait a little bit more that you get acquainted to each other. So we have seen that that way of doing research is very valuable, but most of the time we're looking at the project results and we have to look at the skills of the people.
Interesting. So what is the overall failure rate in your 120,000 case studies that you've been tracking over the years?
Yeah.
What percentage could we expect to succeed or fail?
That's very interesting because there is no one answer. We have 3 categories. One is we call project successful. And most of the time we had the PMI definition, the Project Management Institute definition, which was on time, on budget, on target.
Right.
And what does on target mean? Well, what did we set before the start? Before we started, we said this is our target. But what does it mean if you deliver after 3-4 years? Do you still want to be on target? Because then you are delivering the things from the past.
Right.
So as a standards group, we were not convinced that successful is on target, on budget, and on time. We think it should be on time. I also think that it should be on budget, but it should be satisfactory. And that means we are measuring the start of the project, we're going to measure the adoption. And how many organizations are doing benefit tracking? Well, we have discussed it, of course, we have seen it. Only 13% of the organizations do benefit tracking. So we don't learn from the results, even successful projects, because we don't do the retrospective after a couple of years. So what we have seen is, if we're looking at the modern definition of success, it should not be measured in advance, but measured by the value you create for your customers, for your employees, and for your partners, and for the organization. Then we have a second category, which is called challenged. And most likely somebody is not happy.
Right.
And what we can see on challenged is that it is also very much depending on the size. How smaller the project, the less challenged it is. But it's very normal, because if you have a project of 3 months, the world doesn't change that much compared to 3 years.
Right.
So the less the smaller the project, the better results on challenged. And then we had the third definition, which is failed. And I also learned at university that failed is, this code is not okay. We have not delivered anything. But Stanley's learned, and I've seen it before, failed is not being used. And now the question you said, what are the results? If your project takes more than $10 million of labor cost, the chances of failure are 44%. Wow.
Interesting.
44%.
Wow.
And I'm lecturing my students to learn and to be very tough on their, but 44% stable.
Right.
Not just this year, but also 25 years ago, it was 44%.
We're here having a conversation with Dr. Hans Moulder from University of Antwerp. We're talking about the differences between ERP success versus failure and what his research shows. We've got a lot more to cover. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control. People oftentimes ask me how I built such a strong social media following on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and other outlets. And the fact of the matter is it took me a long time to build a following through a lot of trial and error, making a lot of mistakes. Had I known that there were companies out there that could help me build my brand, I would have done that a long time ago. I didn't know that, but the good news is that there is today a consulting firm that will help you through building your own personal brand through some of their training programs. The company is called Roloff Consulting, and if you're familiar with Emma Roloff, she's someone that I've had on this podcast before, and she's well known in the digital transformation space as well as the sales space. And she's big on TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And she and her husband have started a training course and a training company that focuses on helping people build their personal brands and helping them to sell themselves digitally. So whether you're a salesperson that's trying to reach more customers or you're an individual that's just trying to build your personal brand, that's something that they help with through their training programs. And they've offered listeners of this podcast a free 5-day LinkedIn challenge. And I encourage you to check it out. I've included a link below for this podcast. If you go to the podcast notes, you'll find a link that gets you free access to this 5-day challenge where you'll get step-by-step guidance. You'll get real results. So you'll get some tangible results from the program. And you also get a special offer at the end of it. So it's exclusive to listeners of this podcast. Be sure to check out the link below if you want to work on building your personal brand, or if you're in sales and you're trying to reach more people. Whatever the case may be, check it out. It's free to listeners of this podcast. You can check it out via the link below.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology, independent, and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 167. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. I'm here with, playing a clip with Professor Hans Moulder talking about ERP success versus failure. Let's jump back into the conversation. with as much that has changed with cloud, AI, agile, the movement to agile, faster implementations, the number still isn't changing despite things that sound like they should be helping projects succeed. So 44% fit into that third category of failure. What percent fall into the category of success? You had the middle one, which is the challenged, and then you had the success.
Success could be around 5 to 10%.
5 to 10%. So
it's successful. On the modern definition of satisfactory.
Okay.
If you say on target, well, it could be a little bit higher.
Right.
But it's useless.
Right. You can be on time, on budget, but not deliver business value.
Yeah.
Right. So what you're saying is it's actually the failure rate, you could argue, is actually higher in some ways than the 44%, because 44% is clearly a failure.
Right.
But then you have the challenged projects, and that seems like that would be the real, the bigger, even bigger risk than a failure.
And it is because we are measuring project cost. So we are giving a compliment to the project leader if it is within budget. But suppose the budget is 10% overrun, 10% overrun, then it will be a failure or a challenged one. Right. However, the 10% extra budget creates 100% more value.
Right.
How would you consider that?
Yeah. Right. That's
great.
Right.
Go on.
Right. Exactly.
So it is very hard to have the definitions operationalized.
Right.
So if you're asking, is this project successful? And I'm going to call, and I'm calling the IT director. Yes, it was on target. We delivered all functionalities. And I'm going to call the finance department. Yes, it was on budget. And then I'm calling the employees, and they say, we don't work with it. What would be then the definition of this project? Would it be successful because it was on target, because it was on budget, but we don't use it? Well, we call that a failed project. So then you can see how difficult it is, because it is not that easy to establish a common ground on what is a success, what is a failure. I consider 10% more budget and delivering 100% value a success.
Yes, absolutely.
So that is the thing how we are working with it. So it is not like we are doing surveys at the Standards Group. We are doing case study research, but a lot of them.
Right.
A lot of them.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
So why do you think then the 44% has not changed in recent years?
Yes, and that is remarkable from the data. We are not stable also in our ambitions. So we have two laws. You have the law of more. Each 1.5 years we can do double of work without increasing the cost of the IT. And then we have another law, the law of Murphy. When it can go wrong, it will go wrong. So by doing more and more and more each year, having higher ambitions, we are also not improving our failure rates. So when we started doing the collection of data, it was 1994, we were looking at internal IT departments, projects, doing a, let's say, transition from one system to another. And that is difficult enough in the 1990s. But now we are looking at total transformation, not of your enterprise, but of your entire value stream. So it is not just you who are organizing and reorganizing, also your partners, also your customers. And that means that the law of more is making more, let's say, difficulties.
Interesting.
And so we are improving. That is the difficult part. We are improving. And when we see where are we improving, well, actually when we're doing no projects, that's odd. If you are changing each day by day, you don't have a failure because it's adopted.
Right.
There is no failure.
It's more organic. It's not,
organic.
Right.
So we try to figure out another approach, which is not the waterfall approach or the agile approach, but a flow approach. Could we do without projects? Could we have a no project-based approach? Could we have an anti-project-based approach? Because we only want to have projects when they are the only way to transform. And you need projects. We are convinced of that. You need projects. But nowadays, everything is a project. And we have not only agile, we have even a scaled agile framework, and everything becomes a project. And I think that does not need it. We need projects, but not too many projects, and only projects which are not capable of being executed otherwise.
Right. So you also talked about executive sponsor, and the
Right.
executive sponsorship
Yes.
is a key root cause of success versus failure.
True.
What does executive sponsorship mean to you, and in your research, what has constituted an effective executive sponsor?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. We had a master class for the Harvard Medical School, and we were asking who is the executive sponsor. Well, he was not in the room. And then we asked, how much time does the executive sponsor has to be a sponsor of the project? And we were guessing, well, that could be a couple of days perhaps per month. Well, that's a couple of hours per month. That is the time available for the executive sponsor to guide the transition, a business transition actually. And that led to the conclusion, where are the books? We do have books about good project leaders, but we don't have any books about how becoming a good sponsor. So, and I think that a good sponsor should be coached. So if you are the project leader, you should coach your executive sponsor. And that can only be done in a couple of hours. So you have to figure out, how can I communicate with my sponsor? And how can the sponsor communicate with us? And seeing where are the roadblocks on the way. How can we have another way around it, for instance? Because it is business oriented. It's not about the technology choices.
Right.
You don't want to have a super project leader. The executive sponsor actually is responsible for the business adoption, for aligning with strategy, or even adopting the strategy to the new opportunities they are creating during the project. So we have seen that that is a really interesting part, and it is the most independent variable we have. So we can see that the project team is in place, the organization is there, but we are still figuring out what is the role of the executive sponsor. And we can see beautiful examples, like how it does work and how it operationalizes. We also have done the skill set. What are the skill sets for executive sponsor? And they should be very articulated. So they should be able to communicate a kind of vision. And that has to be done not on a technical basis, like the project should be within 1 million and within 1 month. No, they should have a visionary approach, inspiring. So the Standish Group take examples from the American presidents, and they were looking at the speeches of Ronald Reagan and John F. Kennedy. And putting a man on the moon is few words, but actually the vision, the articulation is very concrete. So we think that we can learn a lot from leadership, and we should implement that in our projects by having an executive sponsor.
That's very interesting. And I love the comparison to the man on the moon vision, because for a lot of organizations, it's like putting a man on the moon. The transformation that we are about to go through is almost like putting a man on the moon. We're going to standardize operations, we're going to enter new markets, we're going to do something big and audacious and difficult and risky. And so I think it's an underrated part of digital transformation is that executive sponsorship piece of it. So how do you reconcile the fact that most executives appear to only have a couple of hours per month to focus on being a good executive sponsor? How do we reconcile what's needed in the role and the reality of their capacity and abilities?
Right. We have a kind of scale, and we don't want to have a mother hen which is always there, because that will bother the project leaders. We also don't want to have to be somebody who is absent. So how to be visible, how to be in place, is to be communicative. So I think that it starts with taking your platform, taking your moments where the executive sponsor is able to organize the shared vision. And it all started, I think, with listening. So the good sponsor is not somebody who says, this is how it should be done. They ask you, Eric, how do you think it should be done? Okay, thank you. How do you think it should be done? Let me continue, and then you can see that we are all on the same page. So the most important thing, I think, of the executive sponsor is to build consensus and to make sharp decisions. And now we come back to, again, decision latency.
Right.
It is not the duration which is stating, okay, this is a good decision. It is the timing of the decision. So the good sponsor shouldn't be there for many days, a month, but should be on the right time, on the right moment, talking to the right people. And that, I think, is very important, that you have the relations between people like connecting the dots. And we have seen where it works, because most likely the one who doesn't want to become executive sponsor is the best sponsor.
Right, right.
Knows the people, has a heart for the business, And we call that expert leadership. There's a real good PhD on that part, expert leadership. And take a comparison from the Formula One races. There are three kinds of leaders. The one who is business leader because responsible for the finance of the Formula One team. Or we have the mechanics for, let's say, how to construct the car. And we have teams who are led by the driver. Who do you think are the most successful Formula One teams?
That's a good question. I would think the driver, but is that
spot on?
Okay,
spot on. So why do we think when we having an IT digital transition that we should have somebody who doesn't have the driving experience of doing the business? So we need to have people who are accepted, but also have a expert, deep insight in the operations of the business. And that expert leadership, I think, should be expressed in a role which we call the good sponsor. So they don't need to do it for days, but they need to make the right phone calls.
Right. Yeah, and involve the right people. And ultimately, to your point about decision latency, they have to be willing to make the decision quickly. If you and I, for example, you and I don't agree, we provide conflicting input to our leader on what we think the future should be. That leader has to ultimately decide, I'm not going to make both Professor and Eric happy, so I need to make the decision and we need to move forward. And if I don't agree with you and I don't agree, it was my idea that's being taken into consideration, it's still, the leader has to ensure that I get on board and that that we're all aligned, even if we don't agree.
So you can see that it is also about the decision acceptance. And that has to do with authority, which is not a position, but is something which is given to you. And you are a leader because you have followers. So people have to follow the project sponsor because they have trust in the sponsor. And the sponsor, well, actually doesn't like to be a sponsor, but has to because the value for the organization is the most important value you can have. So the sponsor has somebody who is really listening, very attentive, but also very fast and swift. And then you can see beautiful things happen. Projects which are not on time, but before time.
Right.
Overvalue, creating more value than we expected. And then I think then the energy grows. And you can feel it. And people really like to do that. People like to work. People like to do those good things. So therefore we talk about good sponsor, good team, and a good place. And I think that we should improve the skill sets of the good sponsor. That is really helping a lot.
Right. So you also mentioned that you're an expert witness, and that's a common trait that you and I have. We both testify in courts and analyze failures. Do you have an example, without necessarily mentioning names, do you have an example of a massive failure that's maybe the biggest you've ever seen or the most full of lessons? Do you have one in particular that sort of stands out as a good case study?
Yeah, I have case studies. Some are my own expert reports, but the best thing yet I've seen was the project in Australia, which started as a small project and ended up with more than 1.3 billion Australian dollars and not working.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. So that was for me very, let's say, comfortable that it is not a European problem. It is a universal problem. And as you just mentioned, you're also doing court cases. So I also mentioned that also in the US it will be a problem. So actually it is a universal problem. And there are a couple of reasons why I think it's so hard to do the projects. And it is, again, about the human factor, but also about overestimating your own competences and underestimating the complexities of what we are doing. And if we have a more realistic approach, then we see the chances going the right way. So for me, it's always about the blue skies in the beginning. People are saying, well, the technology will help us and we can do it. And at the end, it will lead to a court case. And I think that is because of the emotional maturity is not that well developed. The emotional maturity should be, we are doing a project because there is no other way to do the change. If we could do it in our daily work, we shouldn't have a project. So we should consider a project per definition as something which is risky. And because it is risky, I don't want to have big risks. So I want to have small risks. So I want to diminish my risk in advance. So I can see that most likely that the projects who are in court cases are perhaps because they have a bad sponsor. And the bad sponsor says, whatever the cost. No, whatever the cost, it will cost you a lot.
Right.
And most likely that will be by the big firms, but also by the government, because they have big budgets. So I think that there's a correlation between your emotional maturity, knowing that projects are risky and that you have to do it on a well-defined basis, also knowing that you cannot anticipate to the future, so you should be flexible enough to change your approach. And if that's done, then there is no court case because you can resolve it yourself. If people are really fixed, then there's no way out. The other way out is going to the courts. And that is, of course, a very harmful decision.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's very interesting. A lot of good lessons from not only a $1 billion failure, but also just all the general lessons from your years and years of research. So thank you for being here today, and thanks for taking the time to chat about this exciting topic.
Thank you very much, Eric.
Appreciate it. All right, thank you, Professor. Great conversation. Great to have that conversation with him a few weeks ago. And again, he will be on the show next week. He'll be on next week's podcast, episode 168. We're going to have an interview with him. We're going to go deeper into some of the stuff we covered here today. And it'll be more of a live conversation, too. So be sure to check that out. Next week, he'll be on the show as our primary guest. So we wanted to sort of preview that or give you a little teaser of what to expect next week. But in the meantime, what were some of your thoughts and takeaways from that conversation, Darian?
Yeah, I think overall he's just a super knowledgeable and interesting guy. I think he has a lot of expertise in this space, and I think it'll be really interesting to dive into what research he has done and what he has found in that research next week. So I think we should give our guests a little sneak peek at some of the questions that we're going to be asking him so they know what to expect next week.
Yeah. And in addition to any audience questions that might come out of the conversation, which that's always hard to predict. That's always the wild card in the conversation. But I do have some things I want to make sure I ask him. I was going to ask him about just in general what some of the research and data shows from his research. I know we talked a little bit about it in that clip we just played, but I want to go deeper into that. I want to talk about some of the biggest findings from the research, biggest findings and themes. I'm also going to talk about this concept that he brings up often in his research called decision latency, which is basically how quickly organizations make decisions, and he alluded to that in the clip we just played, I believe. And I want to dive further into that decision latency concept because I think that's one of those intangible things that organizations don't think about what the impact is on organizations or the overall project. Just getting into general stats around success versus failure and some of the trends and patterns that he sees that drive those variables. That's really where I want to dive into next week and really unpack that. And then, of course, audience questions as well. I want to get to that and see what questions they have, too. So those are some of the things we'll cover next week with him on the show.
Yeah, I think that'll be super good. I think it'll create a lot of questions from the audience, but also we might even be left with more questions after hearing all of his expertise.
Yeah, that's usually what happens. The guest leaves, and the minute the guest leaves, I have 10 more questions that I forgot to ask. So that's why we try to have guests on multiple times sometimes to have them come back and cover more stuff. So it'll be a good show. Be sure to stick around or check it out next week. Next Wednesday, new episode will come out, episode 168. We'll feature Hans Moulder. And we have a lot of different guests coming up throughout the season here on Transformation Ground Control. After Dr. Mulder is on as a guest, we'll have Lessons from an Expert Witness with Dr. Scott Janke from the Third Stage Consulting team. So I'm going to be outgunned 2 weeks in a row with doctors on the show. And then we'll talk about Intro to Smart Factories. We'll talk about Industry 4.0 with Walker Reynolds, change leadership, platform as a service, and software integration. A lot of different topics we're going to cover here in the coming weeks on Transformation Ground Control. So be sure to stick around and check out new episodes every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also view all the past episodes and sort of search through and see what topics are of interest to you and go watch and listen to whatever episodes strike your fancy. So be sure to check it out at Transformation Ground Control. In the meantime, hope you all have a great week. Thank you for your time and great questions here today. Thank you, Darian, for hosting as always. And we will see you next week on Transformation Ground Control. Take care.